On today's History of Politics, we're going to talk about the 23rd Amendment, the 23rd Amendment. And this one has something to deal with the one piece of property in this country where the seat of power is, but yet it's not a state. We're talking about the District of Columbia here. Now, if you live in the District of Columbia, which has a fairly sizable population, you might wonder, so how does it work with them voting? They're not a state. So they don't have senators and they don't have congressional representatives. So how do they vote? Well, simply put, according to the 23rd Amendment of the Constitution, it says that they are allowed electors, but the number, they're allowed electors just like any other state, but the number of electors cannot exceed the least number of senators from one particular state. So here's the thing. As we already know, or should know anyway, every state has two senators. Two senators. Every state. So therefore, the District of Columbia gets 2 electoral votes in the Electoral College. That's what the amendment says. Now, this is a very interesting situation because the District of Columbia is not a state, but they have what's called home rule. I think we discussed this yesterday. Home rule is a situation where they have their own mayor, they have their own city council for the District of Columbia, and they have their own police department, the DC Metro Police Force. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that the president just can't go in and commandeer them because even though they're not a state, but they have the home rule, which was established by Congress. They're in and of themselves. As you should also know, the White House and Congress and the Supreme Court were placed in Washington, D.C. because the founders didn't want any state to claim the seat of power. That's why they were put there. But D.C. is a political conundrum as well. If I were, authoritarianly inclined, D.C. would be where I would want to target. Why? First of all, they're not a state. They have home rule, but they're not a state. And in that particular realm, the lines get kind of clouded and foggy on how far I can go. I can't commandeer your police force under the 10th Amendment, but there are other things that I can do. You don't have any representatives in Congress. You don't have any senators in Congress. So I can kind of run over you on certain things. For example, your 2 electoral votes, if I were so inclined. Perhaps I could find a way to usurp that. Maybe a normal way, maybe by trickery. Can't say. Maybe I could just disqualify all of your votes if I desire to because they're not favorable to me. Who knows? Especially when you're dealing with a sociopath with criminal, fraudulent tendencies who is an adjudicated sexual abuser, insurrectionist, and fraudster. A 34-time convicted felon. But that's neither here nor there in this conversation. We're talking again about the 23rd Amendment. And fortunately, it is in place so that the good citizens of Washington, D.C., because they are American citizens who have the right to vote, regardless of their sex. Those people deserve their vote, need to have their vote, and have their voice to be heard. Whether it's pro-Trump or not, they still deserve to get their voices heard. And they need to have them heard uninterruptedly. And that goes for all of us citizens in America. Need to have our voices heard without interruption, without interference. If we were to go to Russia right now, Vladimir Putin has won every election that he's been in. But Vladimir Putin, what he'll do is he'll cook the books. There is a phenomenon called the Russian tail, where votes are manipulated at the tabulation level. And if that doesn't suit him, then he'll simply blow up the plane that you're flying on. Did it last time. But that's how they do it in Russia. Here in the United States, we're not supposed to do that kind of thing. We in the United States have a constitution. My question is, when are certain political parties and certain disqualified leaders going to observe that constitution and start following the axiom that we are a nation of laws and no one is above the law? Your vote matters. My vote matters. Everybody's vote matters. I can't recall the author who wrote it. I think it was Thomas Wolfe, but I could be wrong. But he said, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And yes, MAGA, you have a right to say what you want to say too. You have a right to vote, whether you're a naturalized citizen or you were born here and you're an American citizen. If you're a birthright American citizen, I don't care. You're on this land, this property. You're from, you have ties to the country. You are considered legally a citizen. You have the right to vote. And if you want to waste your vote on Donald Trump, that's your business. I don't care. Do it. But don't try to obstruct me from making my vote for someone else. And that's the 23rd Amendment. And some commentary about it to go with it, about the strangest piece of land in the United States. Some might say the possessions are the strangest lands. But you know what's funny? The Virgin Islands has a representative in Congress. And that's a U.S. possession. Interesting. Puerto Rico is a U.S. possession. A whole lot of different stuff. It's our land, but they can't vote. Go figure. But they have representatives in Congress, though. Alaska, Hawaii, they're states. Maybe we should make the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico states, too. What do you think of that? But this has been about Washington, the District of Columbia, the seat of power, which is not a state, doesn't have senators or representatives. If you learned something today, like, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow on the 24th Amendment. We're winding down. We're almost at the end of the amendments. See you then.